All right. So, Nivedha, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Okay, how's your day been so far?
Good, good. Hoping it'll be
Yeah.
good after the interview as well.
Okay. Let's fingers crossed. Let's hope for that. Nivedha, why don't you start with telling me something about yourself?
Yes, sir. So, my name is Nivedha. I
Mm-hmm.
live in Mumbai. My family is basically from Chennai, but we've lived in Mumbai for the last 10 years. I come from an academically oriented family. My mother's a teacher, and my father's a training professional in Pfizer. Pfizer has been in the news quite a bit in the last 2 months because of the vaccine. And I did my
Right.
undergraduation from in economics from St. Xavier's College, which is one of the most reputed institutes in Bombay. And my 5 years at Xavier's has been quite more than the classroom and the academics per se. I've dabbled in a variety of extracurriculars like fests, festivals, culturals, committees, research projects, so on and so forth. And all of these has just given me a sense of what I'm good with, which is interacting and communicating with people and being around people per se. So I like to do what I like to be around people, and I like to do what is best for them and get what is best from them. So
Okay.
that's about me. On the personal level, of course, I am someone who's an avid reader. I read anything that I can lay my hands on. It started from Enid Blyton in the third grade, and it's moved. The interest has only increased all along. I also write for multiple online blogs and news on articles. And I have a very, very deep interest in the Indian military and the Indian armed forces. Following up on the same thing, I started this venture in June 2020, which is now an up and running website. It's called the Defense Archive, and it's an online platform that covers and documents the work of the Indian Armed Forces. So I'm the founder and editor of the Defense Archive right now, and it's a passion project which is very, very close to my heart. And we release bi-monthly articles about different aspects of the armed forces that we think civilians should know. And apart from this, I've learned Carnatic music. I'm a trained Carnatic music singer from in my childhood days. And I'm looking forward to getting to know more in the process.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. You said you come from an academically oriented family, and you mentioned one point about your mom that I wasn't clear. Can you please repeat that?
She's a teacher.
She's a teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you say Pfizer in some? So
My
she's a
father, no. My mother's a teacher. My father's a
Right.
training professional in Pfizer.
He's a what in Pfizer?
He's a training professional.
Training professional in Pfizer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
His work
Sounds
is
good.
also related to teaching, tutoring, mentoring, similar to that.
Okay. So both your parents have a teaching background.
Right.
Okay. Got it. All right. And you said you were in Xavier's. You did your economics from Xavier's, right?
Yeah.
You did your 11th and 12th also from Xavier's because you said
Yes.
5 years, right? Okay.
Right.
So you've been there throughout. Okay. Explain to me this. Talk to me about this Indian military initiative. What sparked your interest in this?
From a very young age, I've been very eager to know what the military does. And if you look at mainstream media, they give you a very narrow understanding of attack happened in so-and-so place, so many soldiers dead, something like that. I wanted to know more. I wanted to dig deeper because soldiers are beyond just assets at the border. They're human people with lives of their own. So how do they join the forces? How do they train? What are their lives like? What are their experiences like? So it started there from a young age. I've read defense journalist Shiv Arud's books and articles for a very long time till now. And in March last year, I was writing articles on my own, and I decided I should probably formalize it by making a platform for the same thing. So if you look at the Defense Archive, we're a team of 10 right now, and we work every. We have 4 sections under the military initiative. So we talk about important historical operations of the Indian military. We talk about an important technical aspect of the military, like a regiment or an army or a weapon or something like that. And we interview military veterans to understand their experiences of being in the forces so that they feel more connected to the Indian public. And each of these experiences in its own way. And we write the articles in very colloquial terms so that everyone can read and understand it. And the basic idea is people find out more about what our armed forces do. Because I interacted with my peers and most of them had a very limited knowledge about this. Limited or sometimes none. And not so.
Right.
I want to do my part in sort of, bridging that gap between the military and the civilians.
Okay. And how popular is this publication that you run?
So in terms of statistics, we started in August 2020 on Independence Day, and we've had about 3,000 plus unique visitors to the website till date. Our social media is consistently growing with, increasing engagement and followers, etc. We have 20 writers in the team, about 36 articles, and 15 military veterans who work with us on the team.
Okay.
That was the statistics, but we're constant by word of mouth. We're growing in the military community as such.
Okay. But is that your objective, to grow in the military community? Like, I thought the objective was to grow in the civilian community, right?
Right. I mean, civilian engagement is also happening alongside, but military community is important because we need to get in touch with the veterans in order to interview them. So that we're trying to sort of expand our networking there. Civilian is happening on the side. It's happening on the side.
Okay. So since the launch in August 2020, you've had 3,000 unique visitors so far. Okay, that doesn't seem like a big number to me.
Okay. So,
what do you think of that?
So I've realized, at least my experience at the Defense Archive has taught me that growth is organic. It doesn't happen overnight. So there have been issues. There have been articles where we get 400 views, and then on the very next day, there are articles where we get 10 views. So that way I've understood that I can't expect a huge magnitude to come in immediately. And at the same time, I also can't be put off if that huge magnitude doesn't come. So if you look at our team, we are a bunch of undergraduates working on this. We're not monetized at the moment. We don't affiliate ourselves with any sort of party or organization because we like to remain completely apolitical. So if my growth track, if our team's growth track will constantly show a consistent growth every single month. So sometimes, of course, like I mentioned, articles go on and off like that. But I do believe that when you're running an online venture like this, it will take some more push and some consistent release of articles and issues in order to be able to make a mark.
Okay. All right.
I agree with the number, but I'm confident that it's going to go up very soon.
Okay. What's your plan how do you plan to grow this? How do you plan to increase this number?
Yeah, so right now we're collaborating with an NGO which works with the Indian Navy. It's called the Navy Foundation. It's run by one of our veterans only. So he has agreed to come on board with us, and every month we have one veteran, so all the veterans are going to come from his organization, and he's promised to sort of engage this venture with potential people who would like to become patrons and donors to this thing. So we don't want to make it a sort of an NGO per se, because we're not catering to anyone who's underprivileged, but we're collaborating with the Navy Foundation at the moment. That is our immediate game plan. And we're introducing a few new things. So if I could just add one point here, I realized that the millennial generation per se doesn't want to read, doesn't want to spend time reading an article. So we are transitioning into audiovisual at the moment. So we're starting a podcast, which we're calling it the TDA podcast. It will be a normal conversation with a veteran, military veteran, or with the family of a military veteran. Because from my interaction with my younger sibling and my friends, they don't want to read an article. They want to listen to something or watch something. So that is the transition that we're looking at now. We're also starting something called the War series, which is a specific dedication to the 5 wars that India has fought over the past so many years. The War series will also be more audio visual, like I mentioned. But the immediate plan is this at the moment.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's continue this discussion right on this topic. So, see, our current government has come, like there is a section of huge section of the citizens of a country who believe that the government sort of uses army and uses the defense forces and uses the attacks just to gain political mileage, right? Especially before the elections, the last national elections that happened, there were attacks which now have scanner, and a lot of people believe, especially who don't support the government, that this was used by the government for political mileage. What are your thoughts on this?
It would be wrong of me to say that they don't use it for political mileage, because sometimes that is always a hidden agenda which is there. But at the same time, looking at this from a military perspective, before, I don't want to name parties, but before a certain time when, let's say 26/11 happened, there was no retaliation from our side whatsoever. This was something that fueled the military community, because they are people who feel very personally about guarding the nation, because that is it's more than a job for them. It's a calling. We have always been at the receiving end before 2014, where things were happening. There was momentary, how do I put it, momentary anger and angst about it, but then we moved on with our life. But what happened after 2014, be it either the Uri surgical attack or the Balakot attacks, or even what happened in Galwan in 2020 right now, all of these have shown that Indian military has a spine. It's not something that it's just there for political mileage or just as a showpiece. That's it. So I do agree that there are some people who uses as a nationalist, that's the word that's being used, who uses as a nationalist mileage. But from the point of the forces, the defense forces have gotten a massive boost in terms of their action, in terms of just their Atmanirbharta, like the Prime Minister puts it. It's a massive boost on multiple levels that they've gotten. It's a great boost to their self-confidence. It's a great boost to Indian indigenous military development. And it puts us in a world of increasing hostilities. I think it puts us in a position of power, especially when we have two very disturbing neighbors on the east and the west.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Tell me this: there is this school of thought, right? Like, see, army veterans and folks in the defense forces, they get a lot of what do you call it? They are respected. They get a lot of respect. They earn a lot of respect from the citizens. Usually, if you see the citizens of the country or even the political parties, they get a lot of respect in the media, just generally in life. It doesn't really happen in India, but in the States, if you go, even if there's a veteran traveling in a flight, or if there's an army personnel in the flight, it gets announced, people applaud, people say thank you and all of that. So they get a lot of respect, right? That's the major school of thought. There is one school of thought which clearly says that, why should I respect the folks in the army? Because, they say that at the end of the day, it's a job that they're doing. And a lot of people do get into the army when they run out of options, right? What's your take on this?
So in fact, I've been familiarized with this second school of thought quite a bit, because I come from Xavier's, which is a largely left-leaning institution. So every time I bring up a conversation about the forces, I'll have someone tell me that, but what about AFSPA violations by the forces in Kashmir and Assam? I've heard this a lot. Now, my only counter to them is, right, you don't have to respect them for who they are as people. But in the time of a national crisis, in the time of a national security crisis, who will you run to? Will you be able to defend yourself? No, you will not. You will need someone at the border who's looking out for you and your family to defend yourself. This is, of course, on the emotional line. So I'll be more logistical about it. AFSPA violations do happen. There are multiple cases of AFSPA violations in both the Northeast and Jammu and Kashmir. But that way, using one or two cases of these violations to completely dismiss the entire institution is a reductionist school of thought, according to me. The punishment, definitely. Armed forces, military people, when they get caught for any sort of sexual assault or any violence, they get away with a lesser punishment because of the uniform that they're wearing. The punishment is not as stringent. So on that level, there should be no differentiation, because the act that the person has committed has nothing to do with the uniform that they're wearing. But at the same time, I believe that using these particular instances and following a very one-sided horse with blinders approach to say the entire army is not needed, let's demilitarize, I'm not going to respect them, that, according to me, is not a proper method. Of course, respecting them is an individual choice. As an individual, as an Indian, I have an immense amount of respect for them in my heart. So that I wouldn't impose that on anyone. But again, I would like them to give me a reasoning for why they don't want to respect it.
Fair enough. Okay. Sounds good. All right, let's change tracks now. Let's talk about your major in undergraduation, right? You did your major was economics, right? Now I'm trying to understand, why did you choose economics? Was there was it a conscious decision, or this was something that happened by default when you cleared your 12th grade?
So we choose our major only in the third year, after dabbling with multiple subjects.
Got it. Okay.
And second.
Okay.
The other two subjects that I had was sociology and commerce. Both of them were more theory oriented, didn't appeal to me particularly. So one reason because of that was economics was pertinent, so I picked that. I had a wonderful professor, my principal in the first year. who really pushed us to engage in a very practical, in a very proper manner. That was one of the one of the good, could have been one of the main reasons.
Okay.
It was definitely a conscious decision. I didn't do this by default, and I enjoyed my time studying economics.
Okay. So you chose it. You said one of the reasons was you had an excellent professor, which is a legit reason to choose a subject in college. And the second was that other two subjects were theoretical in nature. This was more application based. Did you find this more application based, or what attracted you to it?
I found it more relevant to what I was studying. For example, in sociology, I was studying about Max Weber and Durkheim and all. Now, I know that that does apply to society per se, but I wasn't able to make the connect in myself. And in commerce, I was studying about organizational structures and so on and so forth, which I anyway knew I was going to do an MBA. I wanted to do an MBA later. But that didn't appeal to me. Economics, for example, let's say the budget came out last year. We discussed the budget in class last year when I was in TVAT. We had a very live discussion about the good, the pros and the cons and the implications and the ramifications of it. So by that angle, I found it more relevant to what was happening today. This is not to take away from the other two subjects, of course, but my personal opinion.
Fair enough. Okay. You mentioned about commerce, right? And you said you learned about org structures, which didn't really appeal to you because you knew that you were going to cover this in the MBA later, right? So I understand that you were planning to do your MBA and cover this subject later, but I would think that, if you're interested in the subject, it would appeal to you and you would want to get a head start in this area, right? Of course, you're going to cover this in MBA later, but if you have a head start and if you sort of perform well and study it well, don't you think it's going to be beneficial for you anyway in the long run? I don't understand the reasoning as to why it didn't appeal to you because you wanted to do MBA.
Maybe if I could put it this way, the way it was taught was in a dry manner. So maybe the subject per se, if I study it under a different setup, in a case study setup, let's say, which is what is followed extensively in MBAs, it would have appealed to me. But this particular aspect was one header with 10 points under it. And we had to memorize those 10 points and go write it in the paper. So this was something that I'd done extensively in school. So that particular this college was such an engaging place. This seemed very out of place to me at the moment. But you're right. I mean, definitely it follows the same line. So I just hope that if it's presented in a different manner, it would definitely spark my
Do you think there are chances that this subject just doesn't appeal to you? I mean, I understand the delivery part of it, but do you think that maybe, this is a subject that you don't find interesting on a very sort of like basic level?
The chances of it are low, but of course I can't dismiss it entirely. But I hope that won't happen. And even if it does, I can deliver on that front. I can deliver in terms of academic performance. I can deliver that way.
Okay. What were your scores generally in sociology and org structures? Did you do well, or did you struggle with it on a marks basis?
I did well because not studying, my school was a very intensive school. So not studying was not an option in school. And if you didn't like it, you had to give it your best shot and you had to score. So my scores were good.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Let's continue this discussion on economics, right? Tell me what your understanding of GDP is. Explain that to me. Explain the concept of GDP to me.
Okay. So by definition, it's called the total value of all the goods and services produced in a domestic territory of a country in one particular year. So it's basically, to put it in very layman terms, it's all the money that I'm pumping into the market in one. By me, I mean the entire country and organizations, industries, groups, everything. The money which is getting pumped into the market in one particular year by all the people who are engaged in meaningful economic activity. By meaningful, of course, there are a few implications to that. Meaningful economic activity doesn't involve housewives and tuition teachers and so on and so forth. But anything that can be monetized and quantified goes into the nation's GDP.
Okay. All right. GDP is extensively used, right, as an indicator of how the economy is doing, health of the economy and all of that. But then there are critics of GDP, right, which say that GDP sort of as a concept has a lot of limitations and should not be extensively used while you're sort of monitoring or tracking the health of the economy. What are these limitations that these critics talk about?
So GDP, like I mentioned, it's prone to a lot of non-quantifiable work, which is still, it's adding productive activity. For instance, I know a tuition teacher. She charges 50,000 per student. That is a lot of money that's being transacted. But because this activity per se is non-taxable and doesn't get quantified in any book of records, it doesn't get added to the GDP. It doesn't get added to the thing. So that aspect is definitely there. There are multiple things like, pensions, caring for old parents, donations given to NGOs and so on and so forth. All of these things will add a lot of value if they're included, but they're not, in most cases, they're not included. So they're losing out on a multiple aspect of that. Then the problem of double counting, which arises many times when GDP counting is done, because there are so many subsections and divisions and multiple layers that happen because of the bureaucracy of the Indian economy. There is a chance that one thing can be counted twice or one thing cannot be counted.
Give me an example.
Before GST, when you had multiple tax slabs, when there was no one uniform tax slab, I could have possibly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could have possibly counted under VAT and under service tax. I could have probably counted one particular, let's say X commodity X, and I could have added the value added by commodity X twice, both under VAT and under service. I'm not entirely sure if I'm correct, but this is my understanding of that. That is one reasoning. And GDP is used, like you mentioned, as an indicator of the health of an economy. But an economy is, it's economically vibrant, but sometimes it can be socially vibrant also, with the kind of human capital and the intellectual capital that it brings in. Of course, GDP doesn't have a vast sphere to cover those. For them, it's the number. It's only the numbers. So I think that is also one of the limitations I've spoken about it.
Okay. All right. So GDP is a measure of the economic activity, right? The economic output of a nation, right? You mentioned that, for instance, in the beginning, when you were explaining the concept of GDP, you said that the household activity or homemakers, what they contribute is not factored in the GDP. Why should that be factored in? I mean, like, homemakers are not paid, right? There's no structure for that. They are not really, they are sort of, they're helping out and they're contributing, but how are they contributing monetarily to an economy or the output? Why should that be included?
There are multiple unregistered sources of business which is conducted by these very homemakers. I am aware of multiple people in my locality who, sell kurtas or earrings or something like that, which is not registered, but that's still a transaction, which is still money in circulation. That way, I mean it. Of course, their activities as a homemaker, that I think is restricted to the family domain and not the domain of the economy. Definitely.
Yes. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tell me what was India's GDP in 2020? What was the growth rate like? Because I heard a lot of chatter about it. I'm not an expert by any means, but I heard a lot of chatter. I read quite a bit. It was a lot in the news. A lot was spoken about the GDP, especially from the critics of this government, right? What was happening in 2020 with the GDP?
Mainly because of the lockdown and the stalling of economic activity. I am unsure of the exact number of the GDP in 2018. But what I do know is in the first quarter, it shrank by 23.9%, which is a whooping decrease for a developing country like us, which, functions on a day-to-day basis. And in the second quarter, which is right now, it shrank by 7.5%. So both of these numbers, they have a huge implication in terms of the fact that the total value that India is presenting to, on a global spectrum has reduced. So our economic credibility in the international market has reduced. Now, if you're someone who doesn't care about international credibility, within the country, funds are reducing, money is reducing. Like we saw in the budget yesterday, the fiscal deficit was at 9.5%, which is earlier, last year, it was 3.5%. So that's 3 times increase, which means the government does not have the funds. They don't, of course, this was expected because of the lockdown and because of the stalling of economic activity, but it's also it's quite a big blow to the economy, and recovery is going to take some time.
Okay.
So that way, GDP contraction was the main concern. And GDP contraction, especially in the manufacturing and services sector, was a great concern because ours is an economy run by these two sectors.
Right. Okay. You said growth rate shrank by 23% in the first quarter last year. Which quarter was this? Which are these months that you're talking about?
March, April, May, if I'm not wrong.
March, April, May. Okay. 1 second. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. And in terms of you said lockdown was one of the major reasons why the GDP shrank, right? How did we do as compared to other peer nations? I mean, I'm guessing this must be a problem with all our peer nations, right? How did we do as compared to them?
Economically, right?
In terms of GDP. So, when we're saying 23% growth rate, it looks like a huge sort of shrinking that happened, right? But comparing it with our peer nations, how did we fare in that sense, in relative sense?
So I wouldn't want to make a generalized comparison because if we're talking about something like the US or the UK, they've inherently had a high GDP.
So, absolutely. I'm talking about peer nations, right? Consider India's peers, yeah.
So what I do know is because of this lockdown, through this period, Bangladesh's per capita income has increased more than India's. Of course, you factor in the fact that Bangladesh is a smaller nation with lesser people in economic activity. But it never happened in the last 4 decades, if I'm not wrong. So that does count for something. That does count for something.
Right.
So in terms of that, now Pakistan is an economically injured nation, if I could put it that way. They are not someone who's on a good track that way.
Right.
China surprisingly has recovered. They have a growth rate of 4% right now. So their industries have bounced back. Their economic activity has started. And I am not entirely sure about Sri Lanka.
Okay. All right. Okay. You spoke about the budget a little bit. You spoke about fiscal deficit. Can you explain the concept of fiscal deficit to me?
So it's basically the difference, put in very layperson terms, it's the difference between the amount of revenue and the amount of expenditure which the government incurs in one financial year. So a deficit is when the expenditure exceeds the revenue, and a surplus is when the revenue exceeds the expenditure. That's the concept.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Okay, now let's talk about you wanting to do an MBA, right? See, the way I look at it, right, when I look at your profile, as you said, right, you've had a strong sort of academic performance, right? Your scores are pretty good. You've done it from Xavier's, which is clearly very reputed, right? Why are you wanting to do an MBA at this point in time? Why not go outside, go in the corporate world or whichever domain you're interested in, get a couple of years of work experience under your belt, and then do an MBA, then come back with this sort of understanding of how the real world works, and then do an MBA? Won't that make more sense after accruing a couple of years of experience?
Right, sir. So my reasoning was this. I realized that, based on my interaction with people and what the reading that I've done, that a job pre-MBA and a job post-MBA are different in terms of the kind of role that is offered to you to some extent. So, while the pre-one can be more of an operational or technical role, after an MBA, you're equipped with the management knowledge to be able to deal with more things under the same role person.
Okay.
That was something that I wanted my career to start with. I wanted my role to have a broader perspective and not just the project or just the act that I was focusing on. That was the first reason. Secondly, I wanted to equip myself with a little more knowledge, which I know I can do this otherwise from the outside, just like learning. There's no limit on learning. But as an individual, I wanted it to be from a formal, structured curriculum for which a postgraduate seemed like the most ideal option for me. And under the postgraduate education, an MBA gives you a certain set of diversity under the structure also. So I can dabble, though I'm pretty confident about HR at the moment, like I've mentioned in my application, but I know that it could change because you're never sure. At 21, you're never sure what you want to do. So in MBA, I'm sure that I'll have the diversity to explore multiple options and then take my best pick for that. So which is why I didn't sit for my college placement. Also, another reason, if I'm being very honest, I was looking for an HR role and there were not many entry-level HR roles that came to Xavier's.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
Interesting.
not
Interesting.
something, yeah, there were more of analyst roles, more of business development
Mm.
roles, and I was specifically looking for an HR one. So
Mm-hmm.
that is definitely a contributing factor. Maybe if I'd gotten an HR role one, I would have taken it. Uh,
Right.
but
Right. Right.
I didn't take one, yeah.
Okay. So you did not sit for your college placements at all? You
No,
didn't sort of appear for an interview, nothing?
no, I didn't. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Did you try looking for HR roles outside?
I did, but half-heartedly because I also gave
Mm-hmm.
CAT in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
thought I shouldn't let this take away from my preparation, from my focus. So I was more focused on CAT than I was on, job hunting per se.
Okay, so you attempted CAT in 19 and then you attempted it again in 20.
Yeah,
Okay. What was the score trajectory like? How much did you score in 19?
83 percentile, sir.
83%. And in 20 you scored
90,
93.
90.
93.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So,
All right. So, okay. Your undergraduation, you completed it in November 2020, but of course that got extended due to COVID. So what was that gap? Like you were of course at home for a year, but were you studying at that time for your exams, or what was happening like during that time? First of all,
I
tell me how big was that gap?
Also, March 2020 was when we stopped going to college, with when
Right,
the lockdown, and
right.
exams were in October 2020. So March to
Okay,
October was the gap basically,
okay, okay.
and I was studying for CAT. I was
Mm-hmm.
studying for
Mm-hmm.
CAT, and I was working on putting the Defense Archive into action. Mainly a
Okay.
lot of my time, because ideation, everything I had to start from scratch with my team. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time was spent on that during this.
Okay, okay,
And then
okay,
I did online courses from Coursera and Udemy, and that was
okay.
something that everybody was. It was a trend when the lockdown happened.
Right, 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 right.
That
Okay.
was
So,
something.
okay, so you invested time in Defense Archive, right? We spoke about that, right? That sounds like a pretty solid initiative to get into. But don't you think if you had you tried for a job, for an HR role or for any job for that sake, let's say if you were working till now, you would have had like almost 1 year of experience under your belt, right? Which would have helped you in your MBA, definitely, because you have an idea of how an office works, like how a company works, the corporate setup, and all of that. Don't you think that would have been a better decision just to get a job, be it an entry level or HR, if you would have gotten that outside?
Maybe so. If I'd gotten HR, maybe I would have gone for it, because
Mm-hmm.
that was something I wanted to expand my skill set in. But
Mm-hmm.
I never, like you said, I never gave it too much thought per se, because I was more keen on the preparation, and I was also a little unsure of whether I would be able to juggle with both
Okay.
preparation as well as the job. So I didn't
Okay.
want to bite more than I can chew, because I am inherently my strength is verbal and not math and
Mm-hmm.
logic. So I knew
Mm-hmm.
that the exam will pose a challenge to me. So I had to put in a little more time than, say, someone with a strong math and logic background that way.
Okay. Okay.
Which was
Okay.
also one of the reasons why I didn't pursue that end too much.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay. I get that. Now, Nivedha, tell me this, right? See, there are candidates who have work experience under their belt, right? Who sort of pursued their CAT preparation along with some very stressful jobs, right? We have people who worked in sort of like supply chain in night shifts, and they sort of did their CAT preparation, and they're sort of competing with you for a place in the school. Why should we give you this place? Why should I choose you over these candidates who probably did a great job at multitasking and handled jobs along with CAT prep?
Okay, so a few things, sir. First, I'm not trying to say that I can't multitask. I chose
Mm-hmm.
to not multitask because the
Mm-hmm.
year was anyway already stressful. So, if
Mm-hmm.
put in a position of responsibility where I have to take up three, four things, like these other aforementioned working candidates,
Mm-hmm.
I'm confident that I'll be able to deliver on that front.
Okay. Okay.
Another reason is in a class, you're looking for, most places are looking for a mixture of both work experience as well as fresher candidates, because
Mm-hmm.
freshers bring something to the table which may not be there in work experience candidates, because they have
Mm-hmm.
already been exposed to the corporate world. They have a certain understanding of how these courses work, while we as freshers, we come in with very novel ideas. We come in with, it's a clean slate. We can be
Mm-hmm.
molded entirely by the institution, and we can
Mm-hmm.
use what the institution has to offer and are able to mold in order to be able to mold our careers. So, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what we bring to the table, there's definitely a lot of value in what a fresher can bring.
Mm-hmm.
And just a minute. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Um, HR is clearly the area of specialization that you're looking into, right? Although you mentioned you're going to keep an open mind and you're going to explore different areas. What excites you about HR?
So I've, like I mentioned in my application and in the beginning of the interview, earlier when I didn't have any knowledge about it, all I knew that it was a people-oriented role, so I wanted to do it because I'm a people's person, and you know, all the culturals and everything that I've done, I've gotten along well with the people in my team. That was what my understanding was. Now, after the reading, after being exposed to more discourses there, I think it's something which is in certain places, in especially like I've mentioned, public sector organizations, it's underestimated a little. It's looked at as a side function, which you cannot do without if it's itself. In my opinion, it's a strategic business function because data sheets, profit margins, all of those very important, but all of those are facilitated by the people in your company. So your employees become the most important glue that binds your organization together. And in order to be able to get the best from them, you have to offer the best to them because everything is a transaction, especially in an organizational setup. Everything is a transaction. So instead of looking at HR as a policy-oriented initiative where there's a set of standardized rules that apply to like one size fits all, HR is more on a people-oriented level where it has to be tweaked a little to fit an individual's needs, individual's likes. And it can't be, like I mentioned, it can't be standardized. It has to follow a creative process. So that is something which interests HR about me. And just selecting the right fit, to come down to something very specific, selecting the right fit for your company is something that I would like to do. So the match between what the company wants and what the candidate has to offer. That is something that I would definitely like to try, man. I know HR is much more than that, but I'm including one of those aspects as something that would interest me.
Okay, so basically recruitment is something that you're interested in, sort of like talent hunting for your company. Recruitment is something that you're interested in. Okay. Apart from recruitment, what other areas are you aware of within HR?
I have read of total quality management, 360-degree feedback appraisal, about restructuring certain sort of restructuring that involves people and teams. Yeah, that's about it.
Right. Okay. Just give me 1 second. All right. Now, see, you mentioned the people interaction bit, right? You're clearly somebody who enjoys that. You're a people's person. You enjoy people interaction. You want to be in a role which has a sort of like a heavily sort of indexes on that, right? A lot of HR roles are not like that, right? A lot of HR roles are a lot of admin. Like even recruitment, for instance, if you look at the role of a recruiter, it's of course there is interaction because they interact with potential candidates, but it's a lot of admin work as well, right? It's a lot of policy work. If you look at like what they call HR BPs, right? HR business partners, basically these executives from the HR department that partner with business heads. Right. So it's a lot about policies, drafting policies for the organization, for employees, compensation and all of that. Right. So it can get data heavy. It can get into policy. It can get into admin. Not all roles. In fact, a lot of roles in HR are not about people interaction. Right. How are you going to manage that? Let's say if you end up with a role like that and it doesn't have that people interaction component, then how is it going to sustain your interest?
That would definitely be my first pick if I can get a people interaction role. But not having it wouldn't mean that I would completely dismiss HR because admin work is something that I've known to enjoy before. That. I'm talking from a very basic level, but sitting and filling an Excel sheet with something, I can do that. Of course, how long I can do that will be an important question because these can tend to be burnout jobs after a point. But I will attempt it. I will dabble at it. But if there is a possibility to change or possibly switch and end up in a people role, that would definitely be my best pick. I'll show the company that I would perform better in a people role. So that they push me to that themselves.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay, let me ask you a question from your application, right? You said, and I'm quoting you here, you said, my primary interest lies in using the management concepts of HR and examining their synergy with the public sector. to enhance the potential of the human capital of India, right? And then you also mentioned, if I continue, you said a PGDBM introduces me to management theory and my subject before I dabble in the public-private synergy, right? Explain this to me, explain this quote to me. What do you mean by this? So I'm basically interested to know you saying management concepts of HR and examining it with the public sector and the private-public synergy. What do you mean by that?
So we did. This is coming from a project that I did last year in college, which was examining the difference in HR practices in the private sector and the public sector. Sometimes specifically, but broadly, like an overall case study on that. So in the private sector, like I mentioned, it was viewed more as an integral function. It was more egalitarian. Everybody took it. This is, of course, there are exceptions to that as well. But broadly, everyone looked at it as something which was a strategic business function. In a public sector, large public sector organization, let's say Maruti before it got privatized, Maruti in the 90s, something like that, HR was a sideline role because the main focus was on efficiency, operations, delivery, supply. Now, those are the core pillars on which the company can operate. But when you have a workforce as large as that, motivation of that workforce, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, it becomes a very key driving factor that can differentiate a Maruti from, let's say, a not Maruti, like some other company. So what makes the company great is, to a large extent, the people of the company. Now, that synergy is something which, like a PGDM will teach you the theory of HR and like you mentioned, the core concepts of it. Now, I'd like to see if those concepts can be applied to a large public sector organization and not just a private sector firm, because it's not in private sector firms. There have been some wonderful people like TV Rao and Uday Parikh who have applied it to private sector firms and shown that it can work. But what about in public sector organizations? And I've also mentioned specifically the military veteran transition thing. I'm coming back to the same interest point. That is also something that I would like to. Skilling of military veterans is something that I would like to examine.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, I have a few more questions. Let's talk about, so you've had a lot of exposure to sort of working in teams, leading teams as well, right? Even the publication that you run, the defense publication, you're the editor, so you have a team that sort of works with you, right? Think back on these projects that you've worked with people, and give me a clear instance of when you faced a people-related challenge. Any kind of conflict within the team, any kind of people-related challenge. Just think back and sort of let's talk about that.
Okay. Anything under the domain?
Anything from your projects that you've worked with? Have you faced sort of like a concrete people-related challenge?
Can I have a minute?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Just 2 months ago, so because we're an online-based publication, we have a social media presence. So we do what is called an Instagram live session with a popular veteran or popular someone, where we go live on Instagram and the veteran also joins us. It's a live interview which other viewers can see, like a YouTube live streaming thing. Now, I have a networking head in my team who is responsible for taking these interviews. She is the one who's been taking interviews since August 2020. Unfortunately, the latest interview that she took, she didn't deliver to her best. There were problems in the way she conducted herself. There were technical errors in the middle of the interview. She said a few things which shouldn't have been said, of course, in the moment that ended up happening. And viewer reviews were that someone could have done it better. That was what the general message that we were getting from people was. And the other people in my team and myself, we felt that maybe for one, because the first veteran is over, second veteran we've gotten is a very, very popular veteran. I don't know if you're familiar with him. His name is Major General Vikram Dogra. He is a very popular veteran who's been on national television and all. So quite a big person. And as a small publication, it was a big deal for us to have him on board with us. So I decided to step in and told this networking head of mine time, that let me do it this time. So initially she said okay, she said yes. But a day or two later, I realized that she thought I was doing it because she was not good enough, or that I didn't like her, or she didn't take that entirely well. And this she didn't communicate to me, she communicated to someone else in the team. So I realized that there was a little uneasiness creeping in within the team, which I was aware of, which I wanted to, it would have been easier for me to ignore it and, let it go. But I didn't want to do that, because this is how, this builds on and then it becomes something later. So I called her up and addressed it with her. And she that's what she felt. She felt that I didn't think she was good enough, so I stepped in. So I had to explain to her that I was doing this in the larger interest of TDA, and this was not something, if the Defense Archive, sorry, and this was not something that I had personally against the way she took an interview, or the way I wanted to, become famous on Instagram. So I was so I had to explain to her that as a team, when you work, your individual interests are not more important than the team's interests, and it'll be nice if you understand that. And maybe it was my tone, or maybe it was the way where I also apologized for making her feel the way she felt. She was okay after that.
Right.
Sort of, we got on the same page after that. This was one instance. There have been others, but this was something that I felt like I was answerable to her, even though I was doing it for the larger interest of the team. I believe that team motivation was something which is very important to me. So I cleared it out with her directly.
Okay. Now, in hindsight, could you have done something differently in that situation?
Well, when I did tell her that her interview was not, she didn't do it up to the mark, I sugarcoated it a bit, because I didn't want to make her feel like she was not good enough. If probably I had told her in a more direct way that you were not good and I'm stepping in so that we can see who is better, that would have ended things faster, definitely. But at the same time, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to make her feel like she, I was better than her in any way that way. So maybe if I could, I would have tweaked my words a little bit, like you mentioned.
But telling her saying that, if let's say you were direct with her and saying that, hey, I don't think this was a great performance, I'd like to step in to see who's better. Do you think that's good messaging?
So one thing that I realized as soon as I started the archive is this is not a employment role per se, where I am not their boss. I can't order them to do something. Of course, at the hierarchy, I'm at the top of the level, but I would like to work more by motivating them than by ordering them. This has been something that I followed from the very beginning. So I could have told her that I'm stepping in, I'm the founder, I can do whatever I want, but I didn't think it was right. I didn't think it would.
No, so Nivedha, my question is, you said that you could have stepped in and been direct with her, and your messaging would have been, hey, listen, I don't think you were that great at an interview. I'd like to step in because this is a crucial interview, and then let's see who's better among the two of us. Right? That's what you meant. What I'm asking is, do you think that this direct messaging, do you think this is a good messaging sort of to give to any teammate in this kind of a situation?
It's not good, sir, definitely. I would say it would probably be quicker and easier that way. It would be more, the issue will be resolved faster on the face of it. But of course, there will be internal, how do I put this? There will always be an internal problem that this person will harbor against me. She may not directly tell me, but it'll be there.
Okay. So my concern here is pitting the two of you together, right? You're basically directly saying that, hey, let me step in and let's see who's better, right? There can be other ways of being direct in your feedback without directly comparing the two of you. Would you agree to that? Do you think that bringing in the comparison element is sort of like good in any way?
My idea of bringing in, it was not direct competition thing, definitely.
Right.
But I wanted I wanted her to think that the Defense Archive is an egalitarian organization per se, where everyone who gets to a certain position does it because of their merit of being good at something, and not because of a role that directs you to go to that position directly. So I told the other people in my team, if I'm not good at the interview, feel free to tell me and I'll step down and bring in some other person.
Right.
So, of course, my wording was not as harsh. I didn't tell her, who's better.
Of course. Yeah.
But the message that I was trying to convey is this role should be based on merit and not based on any other sort of rank.
Okay. All right. Okay. My last question for you is, talk to me about your weaknesses.
Weaknesses. Okay. I would like to manage my time a little better. I am someone who has had a time management issue. Of course, I'm working on it. It's gotten better over the last year. But when I have multiple tasks thrown at me, I deliver on each front, like I mentioned earlier in the interview. But sometimes I have trouble prioritizing what I need to do first. I start with A and then go to B. In the middle of A, I realize maybe I should have started with B. So that is one thing that I would definitely like to work with. And if, in all honesty, I would like to face criticism in better. I would like to receive criticism better. I don't explicitly react if someone tells me that I'm not, I could be better. But internally, I go like, okay, why can't they appreciate me? That is something that's there. It's very mild. It's almost negligible. But I realize that it can't be there at all. You can be a better professional if you're able to welcome criticism better. So these are the two areas that I am working on, and I'm confident that I'll be able to overcome them. So.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay. I'm done with my questions. What questions do you have for the panel?
I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.